And hello everyone, welcome back to another Love2D tutorial. So in the previous tutorial we worked on giving the enemy or giving the player the ability to get a score as well as making more enemies. In this tutorial we'll be working on a game over screen. So if I say play game and an enemy touches me, we get this little screen here showing our score, a replay button, a menu button, and a quit button. If you press the replay button, it will instantly start a replay. If you press the menu button, then here you go. You'll go back to the menu. And then if you press the quit button, it will quit the game. So yeah, that's what we'll be doing in this tutorial. We'll also be fixing up a few things that I think can probably take a bit of fixing up. So let's start with fixing something up first. Currently, we don't use fonts very nicely. Because if we want a set font that we might want to use over a large amount of spaces, this isn't going to work that well. Because we have to basically come back here, copy and paste or remember this number. That is why I think it would be best to create another table. And this table, we can say it's called local fonts. Now local fonts will just contain a few fonts for us. So medium, and this would be of course a medium-sized font. I'm not going to have small or extra small fonts. I'm just going to go medium, large, and massive, because these are the different sizes that I'm going to use. Nothing is going to be really small. And I'm saying medium because the size of medium is going to be 16. And if you're a web developer, you know the default font size is basically 16 pixels. Anyhow, so we can say font is equal to, and I'm going to copy this font because it's basically just going to be this right here. So I'm going to paste that there, and then I'm going to say size is equal to 16. We won't really use this part too much, but it's more for future reference because sometimes you want to access the size of the font and not just the font. So it would be good to include the size. So if you ever want to know like the font size, like let's say you're in settings and you want to increase or decrease the font size, then the player can maybe choose between large, medium, and small. And you can tell them the font size is 16 and then it's 24 and then it's 60 or what not. Cool. So that's just for future reference. Mostly it's not per se you're going to use, or not to say you're going to use it. Now I'm going to have two more fonts here, one called large and then one called massive. So large will be, instead of 16, 24. And massive would be, instead of 16, it will be 60. Like that. So now we have a fonts table. So first let's go down here to where we draw, because this is mostly where we're going to use the fonts. Now we want to set the font to its default whenever we draw. This is mostly just because if we do set a font somewhere, then that font won't just stay there the whole time. And you'll notice when we get to the end game state that this right here will become quite important. So love.graphics.set font. So we're going to set a default font for every iteration, and it's going to be fonts.medium.font. So we're basically saying add from fonts medium, and then from medium we add font, and font is just this right here. That's basically the medium font. In fact, we can copy this and we can paste it right here. Boom. Now it's fonts medium font. So whenever we draw this will be the medium size. This right here, this would be the same, but instead of medium it would be large. So this will be a large font. Alright, and that's currently all the fonts we really have. If we run the game, we should not be seeing any difference really. So as you can see, fonts still look the same. If we say play game, that's still the same size and that's still the same size. Cool. Now I think it's time we start working on the end screen, the game over screen. So we'll need to create the buttons for this screen. So here with this state right here, this buttons, we can go here where it says menu state and we can make it ended. You can make this game over or whatever you want to call it. I'm going to call it ended state. So now we can have game over buttons. Now we can go to love.load right here and we can copy and paste this like that, and instead of menu state we can turn that into ended state. Now the first one is replay, so if you want to replay the game, so replay game. The second one is the menu button if you want to go to the menu, so we can say menu. And the third is exit game. Exit game will contain all of the normal values, so love, event, quit, and just exit game. This will contain menu, and here we want to pass in change game state, and the state we want to change it to is menu. Now take note, change game state was declared right here, where it just changes the state to whatever is passed in. And then of course we want our replay, so right here, replay for replay game. Yeah, we can make it full replay game. And in here we can just say start new game. Now currently we don't actually ever see the ended state, so we'll need to go here to update and we'll need to change this to ended. So from menu to ended. This will, instead of making it go back to the menu state where we see the menu, it will make it go back to the game ended state or the game over state, and we can see the game over screen. Then we can go down and we can copy this else if, we'll see, and like that. Now this else if will be, instead of menu, it will contain ended. Cool. Now I'm going to go love, or let's just copy this here, love.graphics.set font, because for the ended state we want to set the font to be something a bit bigger. So fonts.large, and this will make the fonts a bit bigger. This will allow us to basically everywhere within the game, while it's ended state, just increase everything with size. Then here we can go back up here and we just copy these three names here, and we can go back down and we can paste them here, and in here we can just make menu ended. So let's see what we can see. So when we run the game, what do we see? Okay, so we see this. It doesn't look great. We can definitely make it a bit better. For example, instead of having it here at the side, I think it would be better if we had it here in the center. And we of course have to resize it a bit, just make everything look a bit better. So first let's try to center everything, because I think that would look best. So here, everywhere where I say love.graph, or where I say 10, we can say love.graphics.getWidth, and we can divide it by 2.25. Now this is a very specific value here. This value was actually calculated while trying to find the perfect way to center our buttons. Because currently we can set the button X and the button Y. And this process right here allows us to make the button more centered. If you have a different aspect ratio for your game, so if I were to just quickly run this, if your game wasn't this aspect ratio, which I think is 4:3, or it just actually looks like a square, it might be 1:1, But if it wasn't the same aspect ratio, the same size, then you will have to change these values here. Or you might have to. It's not maybe you won't have to. Maybe you're lucky. Anyhow, and in here where we say 20, 70, and 120, we can say love.graphics.get height, because this will be the Y position. We can then just divide that by 1.8, but that's only for the first one. For the second one, we will want to make that 1.53, because remember, unlike with X here, where basically all of them will just move here, all of them will now move top to bottom. So if you make this the same, they will all be at the same Y position. And if they're all on the same Y position, they're going to be stacked on top of each other. You can play with this a little bit if you want to see what the difference would be if you didn't add that and stuff like that. And in here we can say 1.33. Cool. Then for the last two ones, which would be the text positions, we can specify 10, 10. And then here we can just keep that 17, 10. And in here we can change that to 22, 10. This was quite a lot of changes, so let's first see what we have, because currently we did a lot of things. So let's see, how does our things look? Alright, so that's already relatively close to the center. The reason why it's further down to the bottom than what it is from the side is because we want to put our score here in the complete center. So this will be below the score. That is why it does this. And the buttons work, so if we go to menu, or they don't because we haven't implemented clicking yet, so never mind that. Alright, so let's do the points. Let's quickly draw that before we continue to the buttons. So love.graphics.printf, and we can say math.floor, game.points, so we're going to put the game points for everyone to see. We can say fonts.massive.font because we want it to be massive. We're going to set this to 0. Then love.graphics.getHeight. And we want to divide that by 2 because it's going to be kind of halfway. And then we also want to minus the font size because remember, it's basically going to look like this. So if I can open up my drawing application, it's going to look like this. So this is our font, right? But you have to remember, so let's say that is the 0 character. But you have to remember, fonts are actually inside of squares, just like images. So this is actually how the font looks, somewhat similar to this. So when we do that, we're basically saying this. Now we have to minus the font size, specifically because the font still goes down. So if we minus the font size, it will go from here, but up until, let's say, this point here. Because that would be the half of this font if we were to circle it like that or something. This might be a little bit confusing to understand, so let me actually show you. So instead of minusing it, we'll keep it like this for now. And then we can say love.graphics.getWidth to say where it should bend. And then we can just specify it should be in the center. Alright, once we have that, we can do this. Play game. And as you can see, the 1 is right there. And if we want this to be a bit more up, we'll have to minus the font size. So minus fonts.massive.size. Not the font, but the size this time, because we want to minus it by 60. Now if we were to run this, boom, our 2 is nice above the buttons. Now what I would like to do is I would like to go up here a bit to where we were here. And I'd like to change all of these 120s to 100 instead. And in this 40s to 50s. And let me show you why, because now it will look actually a bit better. So if we could just go like this, as you can see, it just looks a bit better. And I don't think this end game looks that great, and I don't really want the buttons to be too long, and I want them to all be the same length. So instead of exit game, let's rather say quit, because quit won't be that long. So quit. And actually, while we're at it, let's make this, instead of a replay game, we make it replay instead. And this will make everything nice and short, so when we get to the game over screen, everything fits into the buttons nicely. Alright. And that is actually just perfect. Next up, we need to make the buttons able to be pressed, because currently the buttons have nothing to check if they're being pressed. So here where we say if the game state is menu, we can say else if. And then we can do the same thing here where we say menu, but instead of menu we say ended. And in here we can just specify this. But this time, instead of saying menu state, we can say ended state. And everything else can stay the same. You could even maybe create a function that will replace this for you, so you don't have to do this every time. Anyhow, if we were to now run the game, our buttons will work. So if I were to end the game here, say replay, we can replay the game. If I say menu, we go back to the menu. And then if I were to say quit, we exit the game. And that is basically all for this tutorial. You will notice that the game is not quite finished yet. There's quite a lot of things you can still do here. And I believe the best way to learn is to do it yourself. I am going to bring out another course which will cover some of the topics I'm going to give as homework. So if you can't figure it out at all, once you watch that tutorial, you should be able to get a sense of how to do it. So let's first start with what we need. First of all, you'll notice if I were to just move this to the side a little bit, we have a paused state here, but we did not implement that paused state. Implementing a paused state is incredibly simple, and I will be doing that in the next tutorial as well. But currently, we don't have that paused state. I want you to try and implement that paused state. It's very, very simple, and it's probably easier than you think it is. Next up is the settings page. We have a settings button, but currently all it does is say this button has no function attached. This is a bit more complex, and there's a lot of ways you can implement the settings button. I want you to try and do it first. In the next tutorial, it's going to be your homework again, but I'm going to give you a kind of an example, a sort of, hey, you can do this. So you can try and do it here, and I recommend you do, because it's quite a challenge. And if you do it right, then you have a perfect settings menu. Otherwise, you can wait till the next tutorial where I will give you a little bit of a push towards the right direction. I'm not going to implement an entire settings page, but I will show you kind of a way to get started with it. And next up is make the enemies more different. Currently, the enemies are quite boring. They're all circles, they're all pink, and that's it. There's nothing special about any of these enemies. In the next course, I will show you a basic way of how to make your enemies more different. So stay tuned for that if you do want to get the answers to this as well. But changing these enemies up to be a bit more different, like maybe making them, instead of circles, make them squares. That could be a great idea. Maybe start a scoreboard as well. So let's say you can have a high score, and then you can compete to beat your current high score. I'm going to show you how to do this in the next course as well. But I would like you to try and implement this here as well, because it can be quite difficult. Ooh, that's a fast one. It can be quite difficult to do. So I would recommend you try and do it on your own first. But that's it. That is the end of this tutorial. If you enjoyed this tutorial and would like to see the next course, please leave a thumbs up, maybe even subscribe, and I will see you all again in the next Love2D tutorial.